Hey friends, I'm Greg Nettle, and this is the Church Planting Podcast. I serve as president of Stadia, where we believe that every person on the planet deserves to have access to a thriving, growing, multiplying church. Today, we're going to be talking with Scott Beck on this podcast. Scott has become a good friend and partner with Stadia over the years. Scott is a serial entrepreneur. When I first walked into Scott's office out in Colorado, I saw on the wall all these businesses that he helped to start, that he helped to scale nationally and globally. Blockbuster Video, Einstein Bagels, Boston Market. The list just keeps going on and on and on. And these days, Scott and his wife, Teresa, have given their lives to further God's kingdom. They lead a ministry called Gloo and the Tango Group that helps leaders just like you access ministry people throughout your community and for you to partner with other ministries to see God's kingdom expanded around the world. Let's jump right in with my friend, Scott Beck. So this is really amazing. We have Scott Beck with us today on the Church Planting Podcast. Scott's a good friend, an amazing partner with Stadia, in so many ways a mentor to me. Scott, thank you for joining us.
Greg, delighted to be here. Super excited for our session today.
So, Scott, I was thinking back. I remember the first time I walked into your offices in Boulder. I think I was trying to think back. It's been about 10 years ago now. I really didn't know what Scott Beck was all about, your organizations, but I walked into your office and I saw these plaques on the wall: Einstein Bagels, Boston Market, Blockbuster, Ancestry.com, Pacific Dental, and those were just a few. Talk a little bit about your business history.
Yeah, well, Teresa, my wife, we've been married now 35 years, and
Wow.
We've been on the journey together even longer than that. We met real early in high school, so it's almost been 50 years that we've known each other. And we've had a tremendous set of experiences in business. They include those different businesses where I was either the president or the CEO of those different organizations. We've just had a great time to be able to learn a lot and to be used in some really cool ways. Walked into the first Blockbuster Video store week 1, day 4, member number 91. And, I remember looking at it and saying, wow, there really needs to be a lot of these. And so that's what we set our minds to. And, I do believe that was a divine appointment, because it really sort of set up a lot of our understanding on how to build infrastructures to be able to help entrepreneurs scale things. Because if you think about it, Greg, that's what we've been doing. We build infrastructures to help entrepreneurs scale things.
Okay, now let's talk about that scaling, just so that our listeners have and viewers have some of this background. So you walk in, though, to Blockbuster, and it's really just a fascinating story, because all of us walk into Blockbuster, but give just a little bit of that story and what happened then.
Well, yeah, so we had already been in business for a while. We started in actually the garbage business, where my dad had a garbage truck and grew that into ultimately what became waste management. And so I was able to watch him build infrastructures to enable garbage entrepreneurs to scale across waste management. And so I thought, when I looked at Blockbuster, I thought that same opportunity existed. I loved the concept. And so what we did is we literally became the first franchisee. We met the guy that started the company, a guy named David Cook at the time, and learned about his one store and his vision. And we became, the first franchisee. We grabbed a bunch of franchise territories, Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Atlanta, Georgia. So we picked up 5 large geographies and decided that, we would be a franchisee and we would start opening Blockbuster Video stores. We also bought 10% of the company, the parent company, at the same time, so that we would both benefit as a franchisee as well as benefit, as being part of the franchisor. And so that was the early days of Blockbuster. And then, one thing led to another, and Waste Management, the co-founder along with my father and Dean Buntrock, was a guy named Wayne Huizinga. And so, Wayne had been like an uncle to me growing up in the garbage business. And about 18 months in, I introduced the concept to Wayne. He looked at it. He saw the potential. He bought out Cook. He became the CEO. And that's how Wayne got involved, and it's just been a great story since then.
Okay, so no ties to the mafia in the garbage business, though, right?
No ties. No.
Yeah. Okay. Just
you got to stay out of New Jersey and New York, though.
Okay, so I walked in, and the reality is then Blockbuster goes crazy, as we all know. You ride that wave, but then there are other businesses that we listed that you and Teresa scaled together and founded new companies, and it's just a wild history that you've had. But the most important part, when I met you all those years ago, you and Teresa had completely shifted your kind of model of thinking, and you were moving into this, we're going to give everything to kingdom now and the expansion of God's kingdom. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, that really goes back a long ways. We started serving into the faith ecosystem in the early 90s when we were, actually we've been even the late 80s, when we started serving into Family Life Ministries out of Little Rock, Arkansas. Teresa and I got really involved in that. And then in 93, when we sold Blockbuster to Viacom, and that was when we were about probably 5,000 or 6,000 stores, we sold it to Viacom. We were able to take some dollars and put them into a family foundation. And we brought on 4 or 5 full-time employees to basically serve the organizations that we were donating to. And that would have been recovery centers, churches, parachurch ministries, family life ministry. We cared about relationship. We cared about, personal growth. So that would have been in the early 90s that we started that. And we maintained and were super active in that. At the same time, we were building these businesses. So then around 2010, we decided to take that, which had been sort of advocational. We spent probably, like I said, 4 or 5 full-time employees. And we kept that up over the decade, started working with Bob Buford in terms of, purpose. We started working with Bob Buford in the things like externally focused church and, a lot of the stuff with Eric Swanson and team. We decided to then turn that into a full-time effort. And that's when we founded Gloo in 2010.
And that's when I met you.
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of fun getting to walk into that. And it's been quite a ride with you, to say the least. Now, Scott, I've watched you now for 10 plus years and walked alongside you, pretty intimately for a lot of it. And you have had to build teams. Now, I know you've built teams for every one of those organizations. So let me ask you this, because you've had the ability to attract really amazing talent over the years, but also to pour into them. What do you look for in team members?
Yeah, mission alignment, obviously, first and foremost. Do they align with purpose? Second is a combination between intellectual integrity and coachability. Do they have that intellectual integrity to basically wake up the next day and say, hey, what I believed yesterday, I've now found not to be true. And I'm now, knowing something new. And so I have that integrity intellectually to let go of what I thought was true yesterday to what I think is now true today based on those additional facts.
I've never heard a leader verbalize what you just said. And I'm thinking in terms, for our church planners and church world, I think we've got to unpack that a little bit. So it's this idea of we've been doing something one way. Now we're learning something new that's maybe better or different, or it's going to even set us back 2 steps or move us forward a dozen steps. And you're saying you're looking for team members who are kind of ready to pivot and make that. And it seems like that would be really applicable in church leadership world.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's applicable in any kind of business or any kind of enterprise that you're building, because, things are constantly changing. And, I wake up, I like, there's like maybe half the stuff in my brain that I believe is true is actually false. Okay. It's actually false. So waking up and saying, what is it that I believe to be true that's not, is like one of the most important questions that we can be asking ourselves. And so finding teammates that are willing to be on that journey, and I call that intellectual integrity, that I'm going to have integrity in terms of my thoughts. And so that's just really critical.
Okay, let's talk about red flags with people when you're building a team.
Not coachable. I also really am, I rarely bring somebody on the team with a title. So I rarely will bring somebody in with a title. I'm like, hey, show up, work, add value, learn, we'll figure out your responsibilities. Yeah, I'm not big on saying, all right, I'm bringing you into this big specific position and this big specific title. Because if somebody's looking for a big specific position and a big specific title, then they're probably not necessarily the right flexibility, humble and hungry servant mentality that we're ultimately looking for.
This is why I love this podcast series, Scott, because this translates so well into church world. So let's unpack that a little bit too. Because in church world, we almost always bring someone in with a very specific title. Speak into that, because you're very active in church world as well.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think it's great to bring people on board, to get them into a learning mode and into a serving mode. The most important thing ultimately is that the team accepts them and that the team doesn't, reject them. It's like an organ transplant. If the body rejects the organ, it doesn't work. So how do you get people to join into your team, be accepted by the broader team? Well, you're going to do that by having them come in and listen and serve. And so that's why I like to be able to keep it very flexible. We can say, hey, we expect that this person is going to be head of technology or head of product. But for the first, months, they're going to just go listen and they're going to serve. And then even in that, I'll probably call that role head of product or head of technology, as opposed to get over anchored in any specific title.
Okay, so I've watched Gloo over the years now, and that is one thing I've noticed about your organization is the flexibility. I guess the way I would say it is that your team members ride loosely in the saddle.
Right.
So kind of talk about that, because that's not something that I see in a lot of organizations.
Well, in a constantly changing environment, you have to keep adjusting your objectives, and your objectives are going to change. And then you got to organize yourself relative to those objectives. And if you try to keep a non-flexible organization structure, you're going to have very difficult time responding to the changing environments and the changing objectives of your business. So having flexibility in your organizational structure, I find to be very important.
Okay, and so let's just talk about the church world right now, because you're heavily involved with Stadia in this and really in the whole church world, which we're going to get into in a moment. But the whole move to digital right now is probably the biggest shift that we'll see in our lifetime, I think, in church world. And a lot of churches are having challenges, Scott, exactly because of the rigidity of their staff and their structure. What advice would you give them in that as they're considering digital?
Yeah, it's a great point. So as they're considering digital, if digital becomes an objective, and I really think we've got to think from digital as part of the equation. That hybrid experience is the reality of where we're headed. We've actually been in it for a while, even before COVID.
And you're talking about the Phygital hybrid, where it's physical and digital, and all kinds of expressions in between.
Absolutely, Phygital is a great framework to think about both of those working together, right? And already, if you think about it, Greg, the average congregant was showing up at church maybe 1.7 times a month. That was down from 15 years earlier, maybe 3 times a month. And so already they were going into this gap between the face-to-face times together. What happened with COVID is it went from 1.7 times a month to 0. And when it got to 0, then everybody said, oh, wow, we have a gap between our face-to-face meetings. We better do something in digital.
But it was already heading that way, is your point.
They already had a gap. They had a gap because they were only getting people in 1.7 times a month anyways. So that gap between the face-to-face times together is massively important. And so being able to optimize with a Phygital strategy where you've got both a good physical interaction, but then a digital interaction in that gap, that is the key. Now, okay, let's bring that back to how do you make adjustments like that? Well, if you're going to do that, you've got to then say that is a priority. You've got to then organize around it. You got to then call somebody in charge of that within the organizational chart. You've got to now have new structured information that reports on it, and you have to put together some structured meetings to meet on it. Okay. And if you don't have that flexibility of organizational structure, new reporting, new data and new meeting structures, all of that has to come into alignment. And when you've got that, then you've got alignment. And that's where you get power in an organization. Change the objectives, have flexible organizational structures to organize around the new objectives, have flexible reporting and data so that you can have data on the new objectives, and then create the right structured meetings around those new objectives.
Okay, so this really isn't anything new in church world. It's not that our core functionality is changing. It's still to make disciples and multiply and reach the world with the good news of Jesus Christ. Once again, it's the methodology that's changing, which the church has changed throughout history. But this is one of those times in history, Scott, where it feels like there's this collision of technology and opportunity that's really unprecedented in the history of the gospel. How much do you believe the opportunity is opening the door here for the future of what the church could be in the expansion of God's advancement of the kingdom?
Yeah, well, I think we have a massive opportunity because, technology is not a surprise to God, right? Like, this is not a surprise. Yeah, he knows how this all plays out. And he created us for relationship. And we believe at Gloo that relationship catalyzes growth. And all technology should still be in service of scaling relational interactions. However, those relational interactions used to scale only in the face-to-face. Whether it was a small group or whether it was, in the church itself, whether it's the preacher having a relational interaction in a sermon, it's just, those were all ways that it scaled. Now in the digital world, God's like, okay, I'm letting technology come into existence. All right, guys, I'm doing that on purpose, for my purposes. Your challenge is to bring technology into alignment with my design and accomplish my purposes. So absolutely, the struggle that we're all in the midst of right now in terms of understanding how to bring technology in service of, those relational growth opportunities is absolutely the name of the game. And that's I think you guys are doing a great job in terms of what you're doing with getting the cohorts together and the learning communities around Phygital. That's super important, for the overall church today. But we need to move to a next set of capabilities as a church based on these new opportunities. And I see it as nothing but opportunity.
Okay, so I just want to underline this again. You said technology is not a surprise to God. And I think I would also state, Scott, that because God is omnipresent, God is certainly in the digital realm. And we shouldn't ever forget that. I think we're all afraid, though. I think, all church leaders that I'm talking, technology should scale relational interactions. And that's kind of what we're afraid of, though, is like, can it really happen?
It has to happen, okay? Because God created us for relationship. He created technology. Therefore, he created technology for relationship. Now, like any of the great things that God created, it can be used for good or it can be used for bad. That's just the reality. And when God created all of these things to basically serve his purposes. Now, they can be perverted to serve not his purposes as well. And so early on, we struggle with, how do we use this to fully start to support him and to serve his purposes? It is challenging. There is no question about it. It's not like it's not like it's a learning curve we need to come down, right? So it is a hard learning curve to be able to come down. But when we come down that learning curve, we're going to be able to intersect more people, influence the people in the gap between the face-to-face times together. And quite frankly, the churches will flourish more. The communities will flourish more as a result of it.
Okay. Gloo Connect. Stadia is a part of that. We love what you're doing. Give us kind of the overview of what Gloo Connect's doing now, launching in lots of cities and regions now across the country and really poised to make a kingdom difference.
Yeah, so really Gloo Connect starts with the fundamental idea that, churches are under attack. Okay, they really are. They're under attack on so many different fronts. And if you think about it, big tech and big media are not coming to the rescue, right? They're not coming to the rescue. Churches and the Big C church is not getting the benefit of its collective might. The church industry, the entire church ecosystem is probably pushing $150 billion a year through the church and the parachurches and the organizations that serve. And if you think about that, at $150 billion a year, there isn't even a national ad council. Okay? The pork guys have got an ad council. The dairy guys have got an ad council. The alcohol guys have got an ad council. There is no ad council for the church. There's also not the ability to share data. All those other organizations, they figured out how to share data. The church hasn't figured out how to share data. It hasn't figured out cooperative promotion. It hasn't figured out how do we share data. It hasn't figured out how do we share investment in core infrastructures so that we're not all spending the same money. So what we're doing with Gloo Connect is in a city by city basis, we're focusing on a city, let's say Dallas, Fort Worth, South Florida, Kansas City, and Columbus right now. As we focus on those cities, what we're doing is we're enabling a number of things to happen. First, we're basically enabling donors to be able to provide funding so that churches can basically get scholarships to Gloo Connect and that it doesn't cost them anything in that first year. And that then they can take 50 to 60% of that money and create a cooperative advertising layer over the city. So now all of a sudden you're having Churches Care advertising. Churches Care, they're relevant, they're open, they're ready to serve, going across a city. So number one, you've now got cooperative promotion within a city. As more churches join, more advertising. More advertising, more churches. More churches, more advertising, more churches. Same thing with data. We're working with Barna. We're working with just a bunch of other data sets. Being able to share data, total privacy, but still be able to share data so that, once again, more churches, better data, more churches within that city. So
and the data,
layer.
Scott, is kind of can give you insights into your city, what's needed, what the trends are moving towards, what we can be ministering to. I mean, it's immeasurable, and it all leads to community transformation, multiplication of disciples, multiplication of church expressions.
Absolutely. And it's all designed around 5 areas of human flourishing, right? So it's, how are people doing spiritually? How are they doing financially, vocationally? How are they doing relationally? How are they doing in terms of their mental and physical health? And so if you think about it, those are the key things that the church needs to basically be a core partner and provider in their city is, be relevant. Help your people with their vocational journey. Help people with their relational opportunities and the relational journeys that they're on. And quite frankly, there's great programs out there that churches can adopt. And what we've done with Barna then is we've got a common set of metrics and a common measurement system so that literally you can now understand the state of the church across the country, the state of your church, your own church, by using the Barna assessments within the Gloo platform to be able to see dashboards on your own people and how is that changing over time. And then now the state of the church in your city. And it's all built around the idea of human flourishing. How do we help people flourish relationally, financially, vocationally, in their health, and in their spirituality?
Okay, and when people become when a church becomes part of Gloo Connect, which, as you said, you scholarship them in for free the first year, so you think about these benefits. So Stadia is on that platform. They get a free, or I don't even remember what it is, 9, 10 series on Phygital, how to move forward in their digital and Phygital realm. MOPS is on there now, and there's free stuff, and Carrie Newhoff, and I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so this is kind of a no-brainer as this comes into your city or region to be a part of.
Yeah, and it's part of Barna Cities and Gloo Connect. We've had a very deep partnership with Barna. All of our infrastructures are powering, the things that they're doing in the churches. And so that's right. And being able to then pull in, like David says, it's fully informed. Okay, that's super important. Connected, so you're a connected city, and then equipped. And when you talk about equipped, you are talking about all those partners that we just talked about, and not only that, but they're all then participating in and benefiting from that cooperative promotion. They're all participating in and benefiting from the data, and they are all connected. Right.
Okay, and the plan is, if I remember correctly, over the next 12 months is to roll out in about 30 more cities nationally.
That's right. We're working with these 4 cities to get them really tightened down. We're going to Charlotte next. We've got St. Louis, and we've got Northern California, the Sonoma, Napa area up there with Transforming the Bay with Christ. And so, yeah, there's these different geographies that then we start rolling out in. But, it is about letting in that city, the churches, the local networks, the national partners, the donors, the local manifestations of the denominations, be able to all work together in an informed, connected, and an equipped environment. That's what it's all about. But that's really letting the body be the body, right?
Right.
Because it's all of these different pieces. And in the digital world, in this next place that God has us pointed and headed toward, okay? Because once again, technology is not a surprise to God. He wants his body to be the body. He wants it to celebrate diversity. He doesn't want homogenized church. He wants massively diverse church. He wants massively decentralized church and centralized church. Both. He wants all of that to be able to happen. But in order for the body to be the body, it needs to be connected. It just needs to be connected in elegant and subtle ways so that it can start to gain the benefit of its collective might. Because right now, our siloed approaches will not survive and will not ultimately serve the greater purpose, because God wants unity at the body and diversity in the expressions.
Okay, 3 questions I always wrap up with. First one, what do you wish pastors would do more of?
I think the thing that I would like to see pastors do more of is to use data, use technology to know their people and know their community, know the people, know the city. It's just what needed to, it's what needed to happen in the old times, and it's what's needed to happen in the current times, and it's going to be what's needed to happen, 1,000 years from now.
And we can get it now.
That's your city.
Yeah, we can get it. Okay, what do you wish pastors would do less of?
I think less of is become a little bit less dependent just on the teaching and the sermon, and really more therefore focused on what are the programs that I can easily adopt that are already out there that allow me to serve into my community.
And finally, what was one time in your life when a pastor really made a difference in your life?
Oh, there's so many I can't even begin to count, but there's two in particular that I'll bring. One is right here on my wall, I've got Oscar Remick, and Oscar was one of my first mentors. He's a doctor of theology. He was a university president, and Oscar and Emma Remick came along, Teresa and myself, and they mentored us. They married us. They dedicated our children. And then my pastor in my local church today, Tom Shirk, at Calvary Evangelical Free Church here in Boulder, Colorado. Tom has been journeying with us for the last 30 years that we've been here in Boulder. And, we meet on an ongoing basis. And, it's invaluable, the ministry that he has in our lives. So 2 pastors, one past, another one present. We love pastors. It's all about taking the energy that they have and multiplying it and expanding it.
Church planters, all of you out there, church leaders, I need you to hear what Scott just said. Here's a guy, here's a leader, here's an entrepreneur that's been building businesses that are high impact companies across the country, around the world, big kingdom impact. And I hear him saying, you matter, pastors. You make a difference in he and his wife's life, in his family's life. Don't forget how important your role is with these business leaders in your church. Scott Beck, it is an absolute joy to spend time with you. Thanks so much for joining the Church Planting Podcast.
Greg, we love what you guys are doing at Stadia. We love our partnership with you, and I couldn't agree more. Be encouraged, pastors, because what you're doing is essential. And this last year has been brutal and hard and tough. And do not grow weary of doing good. It is awesome.